get it to record. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Great Trail State Coalition's Cities, Towns, and Counties for Trails Working Group webinar today. Today, we are welcoming some local elected officials to talk about their experiences in their communities. We've got rural, we've got urban, and they're going to talk about what they're doing in their communities, what's worked, and give us some advice as trail advocates as how to best work with our local elected officials to advance trail networks in communities of all sizes. So our most excellent panel today consists of Sig Hutchinson, a former Wake County Commissioner. We've got Amy Ryan, the Mayor Pro-Tem in Chapel Hill. We've got Hope Haywood, a county commissioner in Randolph County, and we've got Maureen Copelof from the town of Brevard in Western North Carolina. So I'm going to invite each of you to introduce yourselves to start. And Sig, we'll just go with you, and then we'll go on to the next ones.
Thanks, Palmer, and it's great to be with everyone this morning, and we appreciate you taking your time to hear about this very, very important issue. The reason I say it's so very important is that I think you'll hear today from myself and the other various leaders that elected leaders is really where it's happening as far as trails and greenways. You know, as a state and just as a culture, we tend to build our trails and greenways through government-funded money, and that those decisions are ultimately all decided at the elected officials' table. So I look forward to being part of this conversation. I am Sig Hutchinson, born and raised in West Texas, was elected in 2014 to Wake County, North Carolina, which we'll be talking more about later on. Served for 8 years and then retired 2 years ago.
Amy.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. I have been in Chapel Hill for 25 years now, and I came down to go to landscape architecture school. And one of my professors said, "Oh, hey, there's a Greenway committee forming from the town. Would you like to sit on that?" And I said, "Yeah, that would be great." So that was how I got started in being involved in town issues. That trail has since gotten built after 20 years of planning and waiting for the money, but when the money came, we were ready. So now we have a beautiful trail, and I saw how important being involved in local government is, and how much impact, as Sig said, that really a lot of these things happen at the very, very local level. So they're places where we can really make a difference. So I served on lots of town boards and commissions. I got elected to council in 2019, and I'm currently in my second term.
Thank you, Amy. And Maureen?
Yeah, I'm Maureen Copelof. I'm the mayor of Brevard, North Carolina. Brevard is a small rural town of 8,000 people over in the mountains. And I've been an elected official 4 years as mayor and 4 years before that on city council. And really, in our part of the world, over here in the mountains, our outdoor environment and connecting people with the outdoors, connecting people across our city, trails are a really big part of the vision of who we are and how we build that connection across our community. So it has been one of the top priorities for our city since actually 2003. I think as we go along, one of the things I will stress is that it takes persistence and it takes time, but it's worth both of those. So I'm very glad to be here.
Thank you, Maureen. And Hope.
I might also say that it takes riding the waves and patience, because sometimes it's up and everybody's on board, and then sometimes you're pulling, and so yeah. But I'm Hope Haywood. I am a Randolph County Commissioner. I raised 3 sons that are Eagle Scouts, so I recognized as they were growing up the value of trails and spent a lot of time on different trails with them. I came quite accidentally into being a Randolph County Commissioner. With the death of my husband, they asked me to fill his unexpired spot, and here I am. Thankfully, a friend who is big in the trail community, Mary Joan Pugh, reached out to me early and invited me to get out with her and see the trails that are in Randolph County. So so I have been able to be on the kind of the front end of actually getting funds for trails and helping to get the Deep River State Trail lengthened as it comes through Randolph County. So I feel fortunate to be a part of it, but you can't let your guard down. You're always having to work and promote keeping it moving and understanding of what's involved.
Well, lots of little tidbits already, and I'll ask a couple of questions, and you don't have to go in the same order that we just went for the introductions. So just the four of y'all just jump in however you want. And for those of you who have questions, you can put them in the chat or take yourself off mute and raise your hand, and we can have you ask those questions directly. This is really meant to be interactive. And just want to share a lot of stories, but I'll just start off by a little bit of some of you shared a little bit of this, but tell us about what your big vision is for trails in your community and kind of what's going on with trails. So, maybe a little bit more background about what's going on in your community. So I'll open up the floor to whoever wants to jump in first.
I can start. So Chapel Hill is kind of a transition committee. Community. We're certainly not rural, and we are urbanizing, but we're not all the way there yet. So we, a few years ago, we got a consultant in to come talk to us about how we can become a more dense community in the future and still retain some of the open space and things that we have now. And we need to grow our housing. We need to get cars off the roads. We just had a lot of multiple problems coming in. So we had this wonderful planner from Toronto came down, Jennifer Keesmatt, and she said, she was thinking, well, you guys really have a problem because you have such a suburban infrastructure and road system. I don't know how we're going to turn you into a more efficient place. And then she went out walking. And she realized that Chapel Hill we've got lots of topography, which in the past has always been a problem, but it turns out it's a wonderful way to plan a trail system. So she came back and she said, look, you guys, you need to turn this into an asset that you have. And what we can do is now, as you grow and develop, instead of needing roads or expanding roads and that things, we're going to build a greenway system that's going to serve as that alternate transportation network. So it's going to do transportation. It's going to help with environmental preservation as we do it down in our stream corridors so we can save those places. It will help with economic development. It helps our sustainability. It's just a huge bang for the buck for us. So in Chapel Hill, greenways are we call it the everywhere to everywhere greenway system we're planning on building. We have 17 miles. We want to add another 25. And that's really our vision of how we're going to grow into a place that's much denser, but that still is very livable and that's taking good care of our community.
That's exciting. Huge.
It is huge.
Huge. Well, Palmer, I'm happy to jump in. Once again, Sig Hutchinson, and being from Lubbock, Texas, which is dry and flat, and there are no trees. When I got out to Raleigh, North Carolina, I just looked around and said, man, this is the most beautiful and amazing place that I've ever been in my entire life. So this was the mid 80s, and I decided to move here and try and make a difference in my community. My family's always been into cycling, so that was something that I really tied into when I got here. There wasn't a lot going on there, but I wanted to try to build more mountain bike trail. And I found a Greenway program in Raleigh, North Carolina, where they had put Greenway easements on the flood maps. So there were 270 miles of interconnected greenways that were already on the maps. And so when developers came to the city to put their development into the city process to get developed, they had to give those easements to the city. And I saw that and I said, well, that's pretty damn cool. So we didn't have a lot of greenways back in the late 80s, early 90s. We had a few, but I set about to start finding federal funding and working with elected officials to ultimately build out that system. Then in 2000, started moving from the municipality level to the county level, and we did an open space bond for $15 million, not really even knowing what open space was. But that passed by 76%, basically a blank check from the voters to allow us to figure out what open space was. Two things we did very significantly that had a huge impact on the county moving forward. Number one, I was very insistent that that money needed to be shared with our 12 municipalities in Wake County. And with a little resistance from our county staff, ultimately with elected leadership, we decided to let that happen. So we went to all 12 municipalities and we said, we want you to do an open space plan. We'll pay for it. You decide the scope, you pick your consultant, you decide exactly what you want to study, and then we will pay for that. That took about 12 months, and then we took all of those plans, and then we took the unincorporated areas, did a greenway plan or a green print plan, and came up with the first green print plan for Wake County, and including all 12 municipalities. I then started moving through my career, starting bond campaigns. We did another one in 2003, and then one in 2007, and ran for office in 2014, and did another one in 2018. Over that period of time, we now have in Wake County 250 miles of interconnected greenways in all 12 municipalities. We have over 10,000 acres of permanently protected open space, as well as numerous parks throughout the region that we've been able to start or expand or improve as a result of these bond initiatives, or municipalities are having their own bond initiatives. As far as I'm concerned, I've been out of office now for 2 years, but we're just getting started, and we will talk more about this. But in addition to greenways, which are just, I mean, people love them. Greenways are community. I like to say I've never met anybody in a bad mood on a greenway. You know, just miles of smiles, and everyone loves being there. But I really want to focus in the next 20 years around nature preserves. And if you talk to people, without exception, 80–90% of the people, when they start thinking about what they want in a park, is they want to experience the natural realm. And they want to do that through a trail or a natural trail or a greenway that just allows them to get out and enjoy nature. So here in Wake County, through our work, we have now preserved over 7,500 acres in 3 watersheds. That represents well over 11 square miles of nature that is in permanently protected government hands that has not been opened up to the public. So one of my real interest is how can we open up that 7,500 miles over the next 20 years to expand out our greenway system, including the Triangle Bikeway, which is a 10-mile corridor along I-40, the most congested highway in the entire county, connecting Raleigh to RTP. And then also the final thing that I leave with in terms of what my interest in moving forward is, how do we take the greenway, which is just magnificent enough in itself, but move from greenways to the experience of being on a greenway. And so how do you enhance that amazing greenway experience so that you are completely wowed, not only by the greenway, but the experience that we can create by being on the greenway?
Well, I think you have a new tagline there, miles of smiles. Well, I love it. And, you know, all of this work that Amy and Sig y'all have done has required or has benefited from some serious thought and planning, looking out over the long range. I want to hear from the rural side of things too, where things are very different, the opportunities are very different. So why don't Maureen and Hope, why don't y'all jump in and say how things are looking in your area?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that opportunity. In Randolph County, when I became a commissioner, we had just were a year into having approved a regional landfill. It was up and running, and the commissioners had decided to for as long as they could, to use the payments for the running of the landfill, with waste management, to use that as a funding stream to support our strategic plan. And part of that, of course, is the health and well-being of our citizens. So since we had that funding stream, I was able to get a large amount for our trails. And so it has been gradually depleted. As you know, those of you that work with trails, you have the actual trail building, but what really takes the time and I think the money is getting the easements set up, bridges that need to be built in that rural area, which is what we are. And so, we've dedicated one bridge. Now we're working on another one. And so our trail director, Mary Joan Pugh, we're just about out of money. And so now we're going to be trying to push forward to get funding to expand the trail, the Deep River Trail along the Franklinville area there. So, but that has been where we have started. We're fortunate. Sig talked about the nature preserves. We have some nature preserves in Randolph County because of the presence of the zoo. And so with the zoo, being there, and with our land conservancies, we've got land that is used for nature preserves. We're fortunate to have that. I hiked out at Caraway Creek Preserve earlier this week, so feel really good about that. That's another hiking opportunity. Our people really who are in the trail community love and appreciate our trails, but note that I said in the trail community. So in order to expand our trails, we have to let decision makers know how many people use those trails. So it is important to hear from the trail community. When I have somebody to contact me, I had somebody contact me just a few weeks ago. In fact, I don't even know this person, but this person said, a section of the Deep River Trail that's near me it has literally saved my life. I was obese and I set out on a plan to, for overall health and well-being. I'm down to 200 pounds and I walk that trail every single day. So it has been a huge part of that journey. And I don't know what I would have done without it. Lawmakers, decision makers, those who hold the purse strings need to hear those stories. And so that takes people, as those of us that use the trails encounter people, we say, it takes initiating a conversation, being intentional in that, and saying, what brings you out? Where are you from? Are you local? And so as they talk about it, then say, well, if you think about it, this is how you can send, an email to, in our case, the commissioners, to let other decision makers know how much the trails mean to you, so that as we work to get the Deep River State Trail completed through Randolph County, and we're running very low on those funds now, and the county has decided, because of budget things that have not been anticipated cost, that we're going to take that base payment, which is $1 2/10 million, and put it back into the budget. So that will not leave us nearly as much from that particular funding stream. So it's going to take really fighting for those dollars to get that trail completed from up toward Guilford County all the way through Ashboro and Frankenville and Ramseur, and then out on the eastern side of the county. So that's my goal for the future. But I just would say to anybody on here who uses trails, let your local decision makers know how much those trails mean to you. They need to hear that, because we have 2 commissioners that use the trails and 3 that do not. So they need to know who's using the trails and why. So tell your stories.
Thank you, Hope. How about you, Maureen?
Yeah. Well, Brevard has several trails. We've got our city greenway, which we started back in the early 2000s. So it's been almost 25 years that we've started building that. And we really started doing that to connect our community. We wanted our children to be able to, bike to school. We wanted people to be able to get to the hospital without having to drive, to get to work. We're a small enough community that we could connect a lot of the different residential areas, the employment areas, the recreational areas with, a citywide greenway. And so we've been working on that for about 25 years. The other nice thing about that particular greenway is it connects right into Pisgah National Forest, which is on the edge of the city. And so, if you don't know, that's like one of the most visited national forests in the country. And so at the same time that we started building our trail, we also had to pivot because all of our big manufacturing firms closed here. And we really started looking at how can we use what we have, which is our natural environment, and how can we use that as an economic, driver. And so tourism is a big part here now. So our trails not only serve our community, but they also are a big part of bringing people in. People come here to bike, to connect into the national forest. We also, a couple of years later, basically bought a large part of national forest, or well, not national, it's city forest now. And we have mountain biking. So you can actually go from the center of Brevard, you go about 1.5 miles up the road and you'll be in Bracken Preserve where you can do mountain biking. The big thing we are working on right now is the Acoustic Trail, which is a rail trail conversion. It's going to be a 19-mile trail linking the downtown Brevard to downtown Hendersonville, which is in our neighboring county. And that has been in the works since, I think, 2008 with Friends of the Acoustic Trail, maybe even earlier than that, working to get the land and the rail banking program. And then they needed government partners to get the funding. As you know, my compatriots here have mentioned, you really have to be able to get a lot of grant funding. As a small town, we can't afford to build, a large trail. So we have partnered regionally with Henderson County, with Hendersonville, and the city of Brevard. Actually, we had to step up and take over the operation and the ownership of the trail, most of which goes through Transylvania County, because our county elected officials did not, and still do not support a development of that trail. And in order to qualify for any type of federal grant, you've got to have a government agency that can basically certify that it's in the public interest and it will be a public amenity. So the city, we now have a 8-mile, 100-foot wide corridor that is going to run all the way up to where Henderson County starts. We were very fortunate in that we got 2 very, very big grants. We got a RAISE grant and we got the NSFLTP grant. And we qualified for that because we do connect into Pisgah National Forest. So one thing I advise people to do is look for, any of those, little connections that might differentiate you from other places. We were, the competition for NSFLTP was much less than it was for RAISE, although we did eventually get both of those. So eventually we're going to have a regional trail. We're going to have our citywide green space, and we've got, our Bracken Preserve. So we've got something for everybody. And it really fits in with Brevard is a blue zone community, so the health and welfare of our people is part of our vision. We are an age-friendly community where we want to get all ages out. So we have really been pushing, the trail is not just for young athletic, it's for everybody. It's for women with strollers with their newborn baby. It's for people who are, in their 80s, 90s. I mean, I've got friends that are over 100 that, come out and use it to some extent. So the trail is really for everyone. And I think that's something that we really need to just work and expand the vision of how people see the trail fitting into their lifestyle.
Maureen, what is the name of that second grant program? Not the RAISE, but the other one.
It's NSFLTP. Oh, and you're going to put me on the spot for, let's see, it's the,
Well, we can dig it up.
I'll have to look it up.
It's okay. Here we go.
You have to connect into federal lands or tribal lands. And the federal lands and tribal programs grant. So
And there's a link in the chat. Thank you, Yvonne.
Oh,
for
okay.
that.
All right, great.
Perfect.
Thanks, guys.
Now, all of y'all have mentioned a little bit about some successes and some challenges, but I kind of want to dig into that a little bit, and we'll get questions that are popping up in the chat too. But just what's working and what challenges are you facing?
Well, Palmer, I'm happy to jump in there, and successes and challenges, because it has been mentioned by several of the guests, and I see it's also in the chat. So I know that people are very interested in this, specifically the challenging part of this. And as my fellow guest speakers have said, none of this stuff is easy. And I have stared down rooms of anywhere from 4 to 400 people who are just spitting mad over the fact that this greenway is going to be coming through the back of their yard. Let me just say that this stuff is pretty consistent. That tends to fall, their complaints tend to fall around 3 categories. Number 1 is property values. Number 2 is crime, and number 3 is vandalism. And so in some way or another, they'll always bring those 3 things up. Let me just address each one of them quickly. In terms of property values, it actually improves property values. We find that property values along greenways goes up 5 to 10%. But in new communities where new houses are being sold, what we find is that the houses along the greenway sell quicker than other houses in the development. So yes, it does impact property values, but it impacts it in a positive way. Regarding crime, we do not see crime as a problem on our greenways. Now, what is statistically studied, is that the crime on the greenway will be comparable to the crime in the area. So if there's crime in the area, naturally it will follow onto the greenway, but it does not go up the greenway or down the greenway. It's just a function of how much crime you have in your community. Now, I always love the vandalism one, because that is just something we just do not see. I'm looking out my window right here, and there's a greenway that runs right through the back of my yard. If you're out on greenways, you'll see they run through all kinds of people's backyards. People do not get off the greenway. You do not expect someone to drive their bicycle up and steal your color TV and put it on the back of their bike and just drive down the greenway. It just does not happen. So vandalism is not a problem. Crime is not a problem unless it's a problem in your community. And it does improve property values. Now, it's hard. It's difficult for people to accept change. They will not even accept a sidewalk on their front yard after they've already moved in. But these are worth the fight. I tell people in meetings, you really want this, you just don't know it yet. And so many times the greenway comes in, and then they build a fence right by their house. And then about 6 months later, they build a gate in the fence so they can then go out and access this amazing and beautiful greenway. I have had people come up to me and say, Sig, I fought you every step of the way, and now this is the best amenity that we've ever had in our entire community. Over Wake County, over the last 20 years, we have evolved. So at one time, it was very, very difficult, and in some ways it still is, particularly in that neighborhood, to build a greenway. But over time, you see a cultural shift, and you see developers beginning to see that this is something that can help sell their houses and sell their community, not only in their community, which has also been mentioned by some of our guest speakers, but connecting their development to the rest of the community. Because what once was seen as a liability now is seen as an asset, because as was mentioned, that greenway to the broader community can take you to coffee shops or schools or to work or to recreation areas. So all of this, in many ways, just needs to be framed properly so that people over time can truly understand the magic of our beautiful and growing greenway system.
And we need to bring on some of the folks, like you mentioned, as ambassadors to speak about the positivity of trails and greenways. All right, who else has got some good?
I would just add one thing to that. One of the other misperceptions that I think we have to overcome is people see trails and greenways as luxuries, and they are critical infrastructure. And we've got to get away from this, when you cut the budget, you cut out the greenway. Well, no, it is part of our infrastructure, it's part of our transportation infrastructure, it's part of our economic development, it's part of our connecting our community health-wise, environmentally. But somehow it's just seen as elitist, or, it's is that luxury. And what we're trying to say is we want our greenway, we want our trails to connect everybody. We actually want equity to be built by our trails, because it allows everybody to get on and get to different places in town, or to get to work, and you don't have to have a car. So I think a lot of is how we frame it, and we have got to start framing it, as Sig said, it doesn't increase crime. It's not a luxury. It's part of the infrastructure of the city as we try to build a connected and equitable community.
Yeah, if I can just follow up that 100% on that last comment. It's and I think Chapel Hill's trying to make sure that that's how we frame greenways. They're not, they used to be, oh, you had parks, and that was greenways was a little part of parks. And now we've really brought it into kind of the centerpiece of how we're going to grow and develop. So I think that's really key, is the way you frame it as that critical infrastructure piece. And somebody had mentioned earlier that, where do you find your successes? And I think for Chapel Hill, we really believe that it's in the planning that we're going to actually achieve what we want. So we also got a raise grant a couple of years ago, and we're using that to fund the study that's going to do the feasibility, the real detailed on the ground feasibility of where we're going to put this network, so that as we get the money to do these things, we'll be ready to go on that. So, and it's just going to take time. It's just going to take a lot of time. So I think you have to have patience. I think you have to be able to pivot as well. I'm sure everybody in local government is now, we've entered a new phase. For a while, there was lots of infrastructure money. There was lots of grants. It was a really hopeful time. And I think now we're kind of having to retrench a little. I don't think that means moving back. I think you just you pivot to that planning, so that when the cycle turns again, as somebody mentioned, you're ready to go. So I think you have to be kind of nimble in that way, and just adjust what you're doing and where you're going. So one part of the success that we've been able to find was we really had our town manager and our staff really got behind this idea early on, and they invested resources in staffing up what we now call the Office of Mobility and Greenways. So we don't just have a transportation department anymore, right? Greenways is part of our overall mobility. So that's been super important. We've invested grant money. We spent some of our ARPA money. We've just floated a $4 million bond issue. So the town itself as a whole is really behind in the funding and things, and has really committed to making this part of who we are.
So the original question, I think, was what's working, what are some of the challenges? So if I go back to that, you have to keep in mind that I'm from a very rural county. We're a county that's very fiscally conservative, and helping people see the necessity of trails, helping people to understand that in today's world, people that are coming in, we're a growing area, so people that are coming in are looking for trails. I talked with the lady at the Archdale Park Run just Saturday, and in conversation with her, a young woman, she and her husband, and she talked about where they are currently living, but that she really would like to consider a place where there might be a better trail system. There's a small community on a section of the Deep River Trail that is Little Houses. Well, that little tiny community located there because they wanted to be on a trail they wanted to be able to go out their doors and go get right onto the trail, which they can do there. And then they wanted to have access to larger cities. And so in that area, they would be maybe 45 minutes from Chapel Hill, not much more from the Raleigh area, Durham. So it fits the bill for them. What works for us is actually showing other decision makers and people in our county that this can be an economic driver, that it can bring people to your town, that this is what people in today's world are looking for. If we go up to Creekside Park, I've talked a lot about the Deep River State Trail because that is one that we've worked on, but we have parks that have some hard surface trails. Archdale has one, and that very much has been their economic driver, that park. They started allowing the park run to meet there. So every single Saturday, people are coming in. Maybe they're tourists in the area. There's a couple there that they live in, I can't remember, Wales, I think. And the husband and wife take turns coming back and forth to Archdale, of all places, to keep a grandchild. And yet they are on that trail all the time because they love it. So what works is getting this information out to those who hold the purse strings and getting this information out to citizens who are from a different time period or have a different thought process about, as you said, trails are a luxury. So that would be their thought, that that's not something we need. We need 911 services. We need law enforcement, we need these things, but trails we can do without. Well, now we have to continue to help people see the value of trails and how they can not just help with the health and well-being of our citizens, but how they are that economic driver and they bring people in. I would also say that what works for us has been to work very closely with our tourism director, and they have really worked to help promote all of our trails. That has been very valuable in just getting information out, not just outside of our communities into other areas, but within our communities. So we're getting more and more people who are local that are coming to park events. Our trail director works with our communities, and they have a hike. They have hikes on Sunday afternoons. And then in the fall, we have hike every Saturday with the different mayors in different parts of our different municipalities. And that gets people out because they're interested. And then there are people that come that live, within a few miles that have never been on one of those trails. So that works for us in a very rural county.
It's the programming, and I think Sig was talking about this too with his nature preserve, connecting people to those places. And Randolph County, y'all do such a great job with that programming part through your Healthy Communities program. So thank you for that work. That's tremendous. You build it for your residents and invite your residents, and then you have a place that people want to come visit at the end. So I want to open it up a little bit more now. And I know Ward had a question early on, and maybe we've addressed it, but his question was, how do I promote trail expansion into a community that is suspicious to the outcome of the trail? And Sig, you kind of referenced that. We talked about reframing. We talked about pitching it as an economic development. So it really is just about talking to people about, where do you start? I mean, how do you just jump in there and start having meetings? And what is your recommended strategy for that?
Can I add? I would add one thing that we've done. We had a very, very suspicious people along the trail. As I mentioned, we had no support from our county, so the county commissioners, so all of the adjoining landowners out in the county were against it because, of course, their commissioners were against it. And so what we found was that really open, really transparent, and constant communication. We actually started a newsletter, and we didn't just post it somewhere and say, here, you can go find it. We mailed it in the US mail. We went old-fashioned. We mailed updates to every single adjoining landowner along the trail with what is going on, so that they cannot say they don't know. And that way they get accurate information. It's easy for them to have it. And then we have just open meetings. We have, they can come and let's talk about your concerns. And we deal with them one-on-one. It takes a lot of time. Obviously, we're a smaller community, so maybe we can do that. We're in an urban environment that might not work, but having that transparency so they know what's happening, because an awful lot of the suspicion is because they have the wrong information or they don't know what's going to happen. So we found that was very helpful.
Palmer, I'll jump to say three things briefly. Number one is you have to have elected leader support. And as a follow-up question, Palmer, I want to put on our agenda to talk about how you advocate and promote and recruit elected leaders who can be supportive of this work. But you have to have elected leaders who've got enough of a spine to be able to stand up to these few people who are going to be very loud and boisterous opposed to the trail. There's nothing you can do to those people. You're not going to change their mind until you actually get the trail in and they actually see what an amazing amenity it is. So first, you got to have good elected leaders that support you. Number two is you got to have good staff. This is a public process, as Maureen said. I mean, we're a democracy and we will live by public process. So from that standpoint, you have to have very calm, very factual staff that can sit there and listen over and over again and just not get emotional. The staff finally told me, Sig, listen, don't show up anymore. I said, you're killing us out here. I mean, you get all excited, then you just piss people off. So just let us stay calm and let us just talk to these people. And ultimately, what you do is you just wear them down. You just let them know, okay, I understand what you're saying. What you're saying is important. We can mitigate that, and it's going to be okay. But we hear you, and we want to hear you again. Okay. So that's the second thing is you got to have staff. And the third thing is you just have to listen and overcome this opposition. I remember on the American Tobacco Trail, there was this lady who she and her husband had a house. You could not even see the trail from their house, but they owned the land that went across the trail. And they were not going to have that trail go through anywhere near their house. And so we finally told them, well, look, I mean, the commissioners, God bless them, they said, well, look, we do not want to do this, but if you're the last link, we're going to condemn your land. So they sold their house. And so we bought it in Wake County, bought our house, we peeled off the area in an easement, put the house back on the market and sold it for more than we bought it for because it was on the trail. So anyway, you got to have good leadership at the top. You got to have good staff that understands how to do this work. And then you just have to deal with the public in the way that they need to be dealt with.
And have creativity and be ready to pivot. Well, how about partnerships? What partnerships are helpful and which ones maybe aren't helpful? Or is that a question?
I mean, I think partnerships are always great. One of the groups that we're working with, they're not strictly a trails organization, but it's the Triangle Connectivity Collaborative. And they are working mostly in Durham, but some in Orange County and some surrounding counties to really identify and protect lands that are important for wildlife connections and wildlife corridors and things. And when you look at the work they're doing and you look at a greenway system, the two work together really, really nicely. And, and they're both about making sure that things are connected in a system, whether it's your environment, whether it's your transportation and your community. When things are connected like that into systems, they work really well. So I think sometimes, looking a little bit at just from the strictly greenway place, and I think Sig was talking about that, nature preservation, reaching into those groups as well, I think is really important. One of the, I don't even know if we should call this a partnership, but one partnership that we need to really foster and improve is with DOT. So I was talking to our transportation planners and they said, you know, one of our biggest hurdles that we face is by state law, we cannot get DOT money for standalone pedestrian and greenway and bike projects. And that I think we need to bring DOT around to the idea that these things are transportation as well. It's not just a road, it's transportation. If we could affect that change in North Carolina, that would be huge.
Well, and to clarify, that is a legislative situation. And the Great Trails State Program that was introduced in the 2023 budget with $25 million does provide an opportunity to fund those projects that could help leverage the federal monies. But you're right, that law that prohibits state investment in independent bicycle and pedestrian projects is an obstacle for a lot of communities, particularly smaller communities that don't have as many resources. But yeah, so that we're hoping to keep this Great Trail State program going with another round of funding so we can help provide those resources to communities across the state.
Yeah, and it's wonderful we've started there. It's just, you know, the size of the DOT budget and, you know, just how wonderful it would be if we could just get a little bit more of that into your hands. So.
Well, how about from the floor? Any questions for our speakers today?
Could I go back very
Yes,
quickly?
please.
When you talked about partnerships, I just jotted down a few things because it's a very good question because it caused me to think about what partnerships are out there that I may not have thought about and what's involved in that big picture, not just for, we all collaborate. And if you have, the rising tide floats all boats. That's the easiest way to say it, I think. So if you've got an active trail building group, which we have in Randolph County. So if you have that contributes to the well-being of different trails, the health and the upkeep, and just that awareness of the value of trails. When you have we have the Piedmont Land Conservancy that's helping to preserve land. When we look at like nature preserves, we have the zoo, but you also have municipalities that we need to get on board. And Mary Joan has done a great job. She's the trail director of getting municipalities on board, even those that may not be, yes, the Deep River State Trail that goes through Randleman, Franklinville, and Ramseur. So they all got on board to do their section of the trail, which took a lot of work by by Mary Joan to get them on board with that. But then you have others that don't have a trail like that. Maybe what they have is the park, or they have a downtown trail, but they all have to see that regardless of where you build the trail or strengthen the trail, that it helps everybody. It helps those municipalities. It helps the county, at large. I think we also need to do a better job maybe of bringing things like our Chamber of Commerce in, because you have business owners in the Chamber of Commerce who may have connections to businesses that own property along areas that you're looking for easements. And so if you can have some connections out there, then as you look at trail expansion, it might make that job a little bit easier. And I know that's a little out there, but we have to think outside the box and think about how to bring in partnerships that we may not have thought about. So, so if you hadn't thought about some of those, I just thought I'd throw those out.
Thank you for mentioning that. And we've got Missy from the Visit Smokies. You want to jump in?
Hi everyone, my name is Mickey. I know it's spelled funny.
Sorry
From
about that.
Visit Smokies. We're your regional DMO out here in the 7 Western counties. Maureen, I met you at the Great Trails, I think it was the Great Trails Convention last year. It was great. And this is a little bit off subject, but it actually ties in perfectly, not just with this conversation, but also with everyone in this room. It's something that me and my organization have been hard at thought on as we approach the 1 year anniversary of Hurricane Helene. We've been in discussion with the New Orleans company about how they reacted and the catastrophic kind of reaction from every anniversary after Hurricane Helene or after Hurricane Katrina. And they said they dealt with backlash for up to 10 years after that storm. And so as we approach this new wave of carnage that's going to be shown on every national network this anniversary, unfortunately, our trail towns are going to get that reaction. And the last thing we want is to be behind that storm. We need to get ahead of it. So I'm partnering with everyone who wants to be a part of it, and I'm inviting everyone in this room to be a part of getting ahead of that storm of the national coverage. We are putting together, it's all happening very quickly, but we're putting together a coalition. And I'm going to send everyone an invite in this room right now. It's in the chat. If you could join us for that. What we're going to try to do is get state recognition for a WNC Mountains Month in the month of September or October, an official designation in a state level or even regional level proclamation that the month of September or October is the official WNC Mountains Month as a way to take that narrative and change it, or at least have a part in that narrative, so that when we're on national news, they can't deny that that month is also WNC Mountains Month. And every partner in this room, every partner can have a say in what that narrative looks like, where we can take that month and instead of just rolling with the wave of new people thinking that our trails are unapproachable, our towns are not accessible, and it's damaged and will never be the same. Instead, we can take that month and highlight our precious natural resources and the resilient people and communities throughout our region. And in doing so, not just the 24 counties, but our entire state will have a better outcome. So I'd like to just invite you all to be a part of that mission. If you could take a moment and just register and ask any questions, my email address is mickey@visitsmokies.org. Thank you.
Mickey, thanks for mentioning that. And yes, we are all part of North Carolina, and Western North Carolina is a big part of our state. So appreciate that opportunity. We're going to finish up here, and I have one more quick question. As elected leaders, how do you like to receive information? Hope mentioned the personal stories. I mean, is it face-to-face? Is it emails? Is it all the, I mean, how do you get your news and information? How do you like to hear from constituents?
I'll jump in. I get an awful lot of it face to face because I'm actually out there. I'm out there on different sections of the trail. I'm downtown. I'm listening to the business community about what they think, with our recreation, with our tourists. But I also make sure that, my cell phone number is given out to everybody so that people can call or email. Feedback in any form is always very, very welcome. And but an awful lot of it, if people feel comfortable, they'll just stop you on the street and start giving you that input. And I really do appreciate that face to face.
Yeah, for me, we're a town of about 60-something thousand, so folks are always happy to stop me on the street, but email is a little more efficient up at our size. One of the things that has been really effective for us is that there have been groups surrounding different issues about trails that have done really good education campaigns. And one of the most important things, so instead of approaching council with an ask, It's a, hey, we'd really like you to learn more about some of these things, and actually getting people out on those trails to walk. So it's not just a phone call, or it's not just an email. It's actually a Saturday morning. Hey, come down and see what we're doing. This is why we think, why we're concerned about this issue, and really share things. But again, turn it into an education opportunity. I think is really important.
I would just briefly say, for the decision makers that aren't on the trails, then you're going to have to do something like email or that intentional personal comment. For those that are bold, you can also always go to a commissioners meeting and stand up and speak during the public comment period and just talk about how much trails mean to you. It's not confrontational at all, but it is more time consuming, and it's harder to do in the larger areas. So those are some options, but email for sure.
Palmer, I'll just finish up and I'll just say any way that is effective is the way to go. Elected leaders are just overwhelmed with information, with meetings, with emails, with phone calls, with staff, with other elected leaders. And so it's really hard. A couple of things I would mention, though, is that people do have a favorite way that they like to communicate. You've heard face-to-face or email or text or phone calls. So it's important to be thinking through that. And we all, listening to this call, have a way that we like to accept information. But what you have to realize is that you need to find what is most effective at dealing with the elected leader that you're trying to deal with. Some like text messages, some like phone calls, some like face-to-face. People have a preferred mode. It's our jobs to find out what that mode is. The other thing that I wanted to mention, Taylor, Palmer, since this is all been about elected leaders and what we think, is to finish where we started and to say how much of this work that we're doing starts and ends at the elected leader level. From that standpoint, it's critically important for you listening to this call to be able to find a champion in your community at an elected level. There's two ways to do that. Number one is that you can find someone who's already there and just bring them along. The second is you can grow them. From that standpoint, you need to find people who might have an interest in, maybe they're athletic, or maybe they have kids, or maybe they're an environmentalist, but you need to approach them and ask them questions. One of the things I like to tell elected leaders, fellow elected leaders, is, they will never remember you for that fire station you built. They will never remember you for that road you built, but they will always remember you for a greenway or trail that you put in your community. People, the elected leaders, like to be known. Many times that's why they ran for office. So from that standpoint, if you can show them how there's a win in that for them, that they can be remembered or that people will appreciate them, that goes a long way at getting them enrolled. The last thing, Palmer, that I would say is all the elected leaders that you see here or in your community run for office. They have elections. So they hold events that they would love to have you at. They need money, and they remember people who make donations to their campaigns. So from that standpoint, you have to be political, you have to be strategic, and you have to realize it happens at the elected level. So get engaged, make a difference, and make it happen.
And that wraps us up. So much wisdom and advice today. Thank you all so much for your time. And this will be recorded permanently in our digital library, so you can refer back and share it with others. So again, thank you, Sig, Maureen, Hope, and Amy. Good luck with all your projects in your communities.
Great. Thank you. Take care.